She walked into the room smiling. Not the polite smile she uses for cameras or public appearances, but the kind mothers wear when they believe everything is fine. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. The chairs were arranged neatly, the doctors stood with their files, and the air inside the palace medical wing felt calm, controlled, almost routine. And then one sentence changed everything. Those who were there later whispered about the sound that followed. The scraping of Catherine's chair against the polished floor. The sharp intake of breath. And then the silence. The kind of silence that settles over a room when life has just been split into two parts, before and after. Tears streamed down her face before the doctors had even finished explaining. Because what they had just told her about Prince Louis was something no mother is ever prepared to hear. And here's the part that makes this story even more unsettling. The palace already knew. We are digging deeper into this scandal than anyone else. So make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the update coming later this week. Because once you understand what Catherine had been sensing for months, perhaps even years, you start to realize this wasn't just a medical revelation. It was a story about silence, about whispers behind palace doors, and about a mother who feared the truth was being hidden from her. To understand why that moment in the medical wing shattered Catherine the way it did, we need to step back for a moment. Because on the outside, Prince Louis has always been seen as the joyful spark of the royal family. The mischievous little prince who stole the spotlight at royal events. The child who pulled funny faces on the Buckingham Palace balcony and made the public laugh. But inside the palace, some people had started noticing things that didn't quite fit that carefree picture. At first, the signs were so small they were easy to dismiss. A moment where Louis didn't respond when someone called his name. A pause during playtime where he seemed lost in his own thoughts. A stumble that looked like clumsiness rather than something more serious. To the public, these moments appeared charming, even adorable. Videos of Louis blinking slowly during ceremonies or resting his head against Catherine's shoulder were shared online with affectionate comments. "He's just tired," people said. Too many royal events for such a young boy. But what the public didn't see were the quiet conversations beginning behind the scenes. And it was someone very close to Louis who first dared to say it out loud. The nanny. According to palace insiders, she had cared for many children before working with the royal family. She had watched them grow, stumble, learn to speak, learn to run. She knew what typical development looked like. And something about Louis worried her. She noticed that he sometimes struggled to follow simple instructions. That loud environments overwhelmed him. That his coordination occasionally faltered in ways that felt unusual for a child his age. She didn't panic. She didn't accuse anyone of ignoring a problem. She simply raised a quiet concern with a palace aide. But what the palace didn't know was that Catherine had already begun sensing it too. Because mothers notice things others miss. The way a child's eyes drift when they should be focused. The subtle delay in speech. The quiet exhaustion after what should be a joyful day. Each time Catherine gently raised these worries, she received the same response. Tight smiles. Calm reassurances. Boys develop differently, advisors told her. He's just under a lot of attention. Give it time. But what the palace didn't realize was that Catherine wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking out of fear. And fear doesn't disappear when people tell you everything is fine. It grows. And here is where the story begins to take a darker turn. Because according to multiple palace sources, Catherine eventually pushed for medical evaluations. Quietly at first. She didn't want speculation or headlines. She wanted answers. Doctors were consulted. Assessments were scheduled. Tests were discussed. But then something strange happened. The process slowed down. Meetings were postponed. Reports were delayed. And explanations became vague. But what the palace didn't expect was that Catherine would start looking back. Back at family videos. Back at birthday recordings. Back at small moments that once seemed innocent. In one resurfaced clip, Louis doesn't respond when his name is called during a birthday celebration. In another, he stares into space for several seconds while the rest of the family laughs around him. At the time, no one thought twice about these moments.
As you know, Kate's family, she's got a very, very close family, and I get on really well with them, and I'm very lucky that they've been so supportive. Mike and Carol have only been, really sort of loving and caring and really fun, and have been really welcoming towards me, so I felt really part of the family, and I hope Kate's felt the same with my family.
But once Catherine began reviewing them again, she saw something different. Patterns. And the more she looked, the more those patterns frightened her. So she pushed harder. She asked for more specialists, more testing, more clarity. But what happened next shocked even people who had worked inside the royal system for decades. Because instead of support, Catherine began encountering resistance. Advisors told her the tests were preliminary, that it would be irresponsible to alarm the public, that premature conclusions could create media chaos. The message was always the same. Wait, stay calm, and above all, stay silent. But what the palace didn't understand was that silence can feel unbearable to a mother who believes her child might be suffering. And that tension began to fracture relationships inside the palace. One insider described a late-night conversation between Catherine and a senior staff member who had once been one of her closest allies. Her voice, they said, was trembling. "Why are you protecting the institution?" she asked quietly. "Instead of protecting my son." There was no good answer. Even Prince William found himself trapped in an impossible position. He loved Catherine deeply. No one who knows the couple doubts that. But he was also raised to protect the monarchy above everything. Insiders say he often tried to calm her fears. "Please trust the process," he would say. But the process felt like a wall closing in around her. And then came the moment that changed everything. Because secrets inside the palace rarely stay hidden forever. One evening, a veteran royal journalist received an encrypted email. No name, no explanation, just a document. At first glance, the reporter almost dismissed it. The contents seemed too sensitive, too explosive to be real. But as they read further, the details became undeniable. Medical terminology, exact dates, internal notes, information that only a handful of people inside the palace could possibly know. But what the palace didn't know was that once that journalist verified the document, the story would move faster than anyone could stop it. Within hours, the leak spread through newsrooms. Headlines began forming. Royal correspondents started making urgent phone calls. And inside the palace, panic erupted. Emergency meetings were called. Communications teams scrambled. Phones buzzed with messages asking the same terrifying question. Who leaked it? But the leak had already escaped. The document described a diagnosis involving Prince Louis that had never been made public. Worse still, it suggested the palace had known about it for weeks. When the story began circulating online, the public reaction was immediate and emotional. Hashtags appeared across social media. "Pray for Prince Louis." Messages of concern flooded royal forums. But Catherine didn't learn about the leak from the palace. She learned about it the way millions of other people did, through a notification on her phone. Insiders say she wasn't furious at the journalist. She wasn't even furious at the whistleblower. She was furious at the silence that had forced someone to leak it in the first place. Behind closed doors, palace officials began searching for the source. Staff members were questioned. Rumors spread. Some believed it was a rebellious employee who couldn't bear the secrecy. Others feared it was a calculated act of sabotage. But none of that mattered to Catherine in that moment. Because the document contained the truth she had been begging to hear. Doctors described a rare neurological condition, progressive and genetic. There was no cure, only management, only uncertainty. The report explained that Prince Louis could face increasing challenges with speech, coordination, and cognitive development. Some days might bring improvement. Others could bring setbacks. For Catherine, reading those words was like watching her worst fears come to life. But what stunned palace insiders most was what happened next. Because while advisors immediately began discussing public statements, reputation management, and the monarchy's image, Catherine was thinking about only one thing: her son. Inside the palace, conversations quickly turned to the future. What would this mean for royal appearances? For succession expectations? For the carefully constructed image of stability the monarchy has spent centuries protecting? But what the institution seemed to forget in that moment was that behind every crown, there is still a family, a mother, a father, and a child who never asked to be part of history. For Prince Louis, the life once imagined for him may now look very different. The balcony waves, the grand ceremonies, the expectation that he might one day stand beside his brother in royal duty. Those possibilities may quietly fade into the background. Instead, the focus may become something far more personal: care, protection, and a quieter life away from cameras. But perhaps the most haunting question of all still lingers over this story. Was the palace protecting a young prince from public scrutiny, or protecting the institution from uncomfortable truths? Because history has shown us something again and again. Behind palace walls, compassion and control often exist side by side, and sometimes they collide. For Catherine, the emotional toll of this journey is impossible to measure. She has spent years mastering the art of royal composure, smiling through public duties, standing gracefully under the weight of expectation. But in that quiet medical room, none of those royal rules mattered. She was simply a mother hearing news that would reshape her child's future, and perhaps reshape the monarchy itself. So now we want to hear from you. Do you believe the royal family handled this situation the right way by trying to keep Prince Louis's diagnosis private? Or do you think the truth should have been shared sooner? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and these conversations are important, especially when they involve the lives of children growing up under the world's brightest spotlight.